Welcome to Mandibil. This is part 17, I think, of my deconstruction. I always forget to check the latest number before I start a video, and then I sort of reminded, oh shit, how far did we get? But it doesn't matter. You will see the number in the title below, and hopefully it's correct, right? Last time we got to around the 13-minute and 45-second mark into lecture 3 of the case for illusionism in Keith Frankish's lecture series on that topic, illusionism, which is a particular way of dealing with the hard problem of consciousness, which you might want to look up. I think I will make at some point a video where I try to steelman this hard problem thing or materialism thing, right? Now, I'm not crazy about steelmanning. I think it's stupid to try to make other people's arguments, right? But since I have been a materialist all my life until about 7 years ago when I realized it's stupid, right? It's just naive realism, which most people in the world suffer from, right? It's the way the mind is put together in order to get around. You're not inclined to say that your experience is not the real thing. You are saying to yourself from birth, basically, and you are being amplified by the people around you in this thinking, right? So starting to think that, well, my experience is not the real thing, it's another thing I don't have access to. That sounds crazy to most people, right? But when you really think about it philosophically and do some metaphysics, we could call it, right? And there's also that the metaphysics is also being misused sometimes, in my opinion, right? But maybe I should get into that point another time. But it's about that. It seems to me that some people argue that metaphysics is about, in an idealist approach, then metaphysics is about that thing that is you can't get to, right? The things themselves, what are they about? That's metaphysics. No, I think metaphysics is all the foundation you need in order to do physics, and that is basically the thing you do have access to, right? Physics is, when you're using empiricism, you're using your qualia and so on to make these predictions, scientific predictions, right? I mean, you could make predictions using rain dance, possibly, right? And somebody makes a prediction. There's nothing wrong with the prediction as such. It's just when you argue for how you get to the prediction, right? Then it's dependent on somebody's mind, let's say, right? Rather than scientific approach, which is everybody can do, so to say, right? That's the approach, right? Because in olden days, people didn't have scientific ideas. They were wrapped up in religion and mysticism and myths and legends and so on, right? In order to have some answers for those big questions they couldn't answer, so that they could also stay, as powerful towards the people, toward the children, so the children didn't question too much, but accepted their parents as their masters, right? That's also very important for religious people, and particularly Christians, to say that children should obey their parents, right? Yeah, they say they should honor them, right? But why shouldn't parents honor their children, right? That's my go-to, right? Honor your children, right? How did I get to this? Never mind. But in the last chapter, I went a little emo on him because I am fucking annoyed with how badly it's argued, right? He's basically using qualia all over the place to argue for why qualia is an illusion, right? And there's also another argument that I didn't catch because I was wrapped up in some other thinking while I was watching it. But he said, if it's inexplicable, I did talk about that, but there's a particular aspect I want to get to, which is, yes, and I think I also talked a bit about it, but I didn't go into deep enough, right? there are some aspects that you can't explain. Because all explanations have a foundation of inexplicable stuff with which you explain everything else. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be that way, but I think it's unavoidable. But that's my point of view, right? That's my thinking. You have to have what I call a reduction base, right? And this comes together because when you end up at qualia, ultimately, in my opinion, you are exactly there where you can't explain it. How do you explain yellow, right? Well, you can't. Try, please. Just tell me how you do it, right? You can only say, I have the experience of yellow, this taste, all this sound, all this feel, all this smell, right? They are inexplicable exactly because they are the deepest, closest, direct insight you have into that thing you do not have access to, right? So it can't be explained because all what comes after that is somehow related to that deepest experience, right? So an elephant is referenced by some splashes of color and some particular sounds and a particular smell and so on, right? Which is the deepest layer, which is the qualia. They can't be explained. That doesn't mean they are an illusion. That means they are the fucking most important aspect of your experience, man, right? And try to, if you want to illuminate this, it may not be the most surefire argument in the world, but if you want to put this to the test, what I'm talking about, try to find some kind of concept, whatever, some kind of word, maybe just like, Socrates when he sort of, the Socratic method, right? Something along the line, but then try to define it, right? And then the words you use to define that, define them, right? And then define them and so on backwards until you get to a point where you can't explain it anymore. I bet you will end up in the qualia, right? Eventually, all definitions leads to qualia. Just like all roads lead to Rome, right? All definitions lead to qualia. And that's why there's a hard problem for materialists, because they always end up with, I have an experience that I need to refer to in order to whatever, right? They look at an oscilloscope on some neuroscientific experiment. They need to open their eyes and have an experience of that oscilloscope, right? Before they can say anything about that experiment, right? They need that qualia in order to do that materialist thing where they don't think qualia are important, or they don't understand how it gets to be qualia. Because they have the cart before the horse, right? So, or the horse behind the cart maybe, right? behind Decon. And that's very, very important. He has not done, in my opinion, any sufficient self-critical thinking here, right? There are so many holes in this, and it's sort of the way this pretense of an argument it put together is just sort of cherry picking various stuff, as I said, right? Using fancy words to make you think that he's very smart and technical, and he's probably thought it all out, right? Just grabbing some fancy word doesn't prove anything, right? And all this also sort of fallacies like, there are some straw man arguments here and there, right? And also these artificial situations like this woman with a box and a beetle and what the right? I mean, it's like, and if this is like finding that needle in a haystack kind of scenario where I'm also because I'm deconstructing it, I'm very focused on every detail. So I might very well lose a very important point at some time where he's actually dealing with the problem he's trying to deal with. But because he's said so many, fluff, I am sort of, it's the small picture is hidden or camouflaged by his, tsunami of weird things, right? Sort of cherry-picked scenarios and experiments and ideas or whatever triangles and so on, right? So when he actually get to the core point, try to get across, I might not even see it. I'm not saying I won't, but it's like I would like to be clear on where we are going. It's like going on a trip with your friend, and the friend says, "Yes, let's go on a trip." And I say, "Okay, where do you want to?" "Yeah, sure, let's go. But where are we going?" No. I'm just saying we are going first. We are going there. Okay, and then when we get there, I'll tell you where we go next and so on. No, I would like to have are we going to Rome? Are we going to Mexico City? Where are we going, right? And how do we get there? And how do we plan to get there? And what's the overall idea of this, right? I would like to have that beforehand, rather than just taking one leg at a time. And then all of a sudden, aha, now we are here, right? So maybe it's not the best analogy, but it's this kind of, don't let people understand your argument before you present the argument. Just let them sit there waiting, longing for an explanation, and sort of get carried away in this tsunami of words and fallacies and so on, right? So they are sort of groomed into a potential acceptance of whatever it is he tries to do, right? Okay, let's head further into this, see how it goes. Let me see if the volume is up. Yes.
Okay, well, let's look at another consideration now, another argument. This one I've called theoretical economy. The idea here is that illusionism offers a simpler, more elegant, more economical account of consciousness than its rivals. Simpler than realist alternatives. The central question about phenomenal consciousness is, how does phenomenality, these mental qualities, how do these fit into the scientific picture of the world? This is the hard problem. And so I'll say a little bit about that picture. This is very simplified and schematic.
So it's the hard problem. So he's talking about qualia is the same as phenomenality. I've never been very, felt safe with the term phenomenality. I don't know what that is, to be honest, right? The scientific picture of the world. What is the world then? What is that? Where is that world? If the experiences I might have of that set world are an illusion, what else do I have to approach that world? How does that enter that world? Where does it come from? How does it arrive, right? Or are you the whole world? Or how should... I mean, this is a shining example of how badly argued materialist or scientific physicalist metaphysics is, right? Yes, we have the big world out there, and you have some little Cartesian theater. Fuck that, right? It's an illusion. Just accept that there's a big scientific world out there, but that has been reported by some masters of science, right?
And it skates over an awful lot of complications, but it will do to make the point. So, science is painting a layered picture of the natural world, something like this. We can start with high-level, complex high-level phenomena such as social phenomena, and the activities of groups of people, large groups of people, and how they interact and so on. And then we can step...
Oh, social? And hang on. You're sort of lumping things together here, apparently, right? What is social? Please define what social is, right? I don't understand what social is. Show me something. No, it's an illusion, so I can't use my vision and so on. I just have to rely on reports. Oh, reports, they're just sounds, so I can't trust that either. So how do I understand what social is, right? So you're telling me I shouldn't trust my senses or my qualia, right? Through my senses, apparently. And now you're using my senses to tell me about some stuff. I have to listen to you in order to understand what the hell your report is about, right? How else would I get to that report if I'm not using my qualia? So please explain to me what you mean by social. Your little bubbles with lines like a triangle doesn't explain anything. These are very abstract presentations, right? Explain something social to me, right? Explain what that social is in my everyday I could go and do now, right? I can't look up a triangle with 3 bubbles and with 3 little whatever is there in this picture, right? I can't find that anywhere, right? Except in his weird presentation. That doesn't explain what social is.
Up down a level to psychological phenomena, mental states and processes, then down to neural processes in brains, to cellular processes within individual cells.
So this is also scientific reductionism, right? So it's sort of a macro system, and then we're moving down to the bare basics of atoms and possibly, right?
Chemical processes, chemical reactions and so on, and finally basic physical processes involving
exactly.
atoms and their subatomic components and so on, right down to the...
Okay, these are not qualia, right? Surely they're not qualia, as they're presented here. These are abstractions. These are geometric stuff, right? These are lines and squares and in circles or circular structures and ovals and cylinders and so on, right? You can do this without any qualia. That's one of the problems with scientism. It is that they're staying in there. They have abstracted from the qualia these kinds of models and abstractions. And then they stay in the abstractions and try to reduce their abstractions into something abstract at the bottom. Well, of course that won't work, right? Because all your experience is based on your qualia. So he wants to stay with his little balls and his little squares and his little cylinders, right? And try to reduce that? No, you have to reduce to your experience. Because that's the access you have to that world you're disconnected from, right? So whatever you throw up of, at least if these are supposed to be some kind of description of what is out there, these are abstractions from your experiences. They are not the things out there, right? You have to understand this, right? You can't have it both ways.
To the very basic entities posited by modern physics. And it's a working hypothesis, at least, that processes at each of these levels, phenomena at each of these levels, can be reductively explained in terms of mechanisms at a lower level. The idea is that phenomena at each level can be characterized in functional terms, in terms of operations or tasks that are being carried out. And then we look down to a lower level to identify the mechanisms that perform those functions, that carry out those functions, that implement them, that realize them. So you remember the definition of the discussion of the television from lecture 1. We saw how the task that a television performs is that of converting an incoming radio signal into a moving picture. And we saw how by looking at the mechanisms inside the television, we saw how this task was performed. We understood how it was done. We reductively explained that function in terms of mechanisms at a lower level. And so the general idea here is then that each of these levels can be reductively explained in terms of processes at each of these levels can be reductively explained in terms of more basic processes at a level below. So social phenomena can be reductively explained in psychological terms, in terms of the beliefs and desires and other mental states of the individuals who compose the society. Psychological phenomena can be reductively explained in terms of processes within the brain, the coordinated activity of masses of neurons communicating with each other and signaling to each other and so on. That these neural processes can be explained in terms of processes within individual neurons, individual brain cells, the way that neurotransmitters work, say, and the way that individual neurons fire and so on. That these processes in turn can be explained in terms of the chemical reactions that are occurring, the molecules binding to receptor sites and chemical reactions within cells and so on. And that all this in turn can be those chemical processes can be explained in turn in terms of basic physical processes at an atomic and subatomic level. So I get this nice picture that everything can be reductively explained in terms of processes at a more basic level, right down to the bottom. So the lower levels, and then we can think of this as kind of building up the other way, that the lower levels realize the processes at the higher level. So basic physical processes realize chemical ones, they implement, they make them real. Chemical processes implement cellular ones,
Okay, Keith, I got the picture.
Ones, psychological ones, social ones. I should stress here that this division into layers is somewhat arbitrary, and there are many different ways of carving this up, and there are many complications that need to be added in here. Issues about interaction between levels, and this is a very simplified version of the picture, but it's enough to get the sense of the shape of the problem for phenomenal consciousness. And it's a further assumption of this picture that the basic physical level is fundamental. That's not realized in anything else. That's just a brute fact about the world. But that's how it is at the basic physical level. That level is also taken to be relatively simple in the sense that there are a relatively small number of fundamental entities and forces. So all the rich complexity at the higher level can be explained in terms of a relatively simple ontology at the very basic level. And it's also, basic physics is also widely assumed to be complete in the sense that we don't need to appeal to anything outside basic physics in order to explain what happens there. The activity of the basic physical components can be completely explained in terms of the previous state of the basic physical system and basic physical laws. So the picture that we get here is that everything is ultimately realized in basic physical states and can in principle be explained in terms of them. In principle, not in practice. We need all these higher level sciences to pick out patterns and that are of importance to us in order to help us see patterns and generalizations and explanations that wouldn't be visible just by looking at the basic physics. But still, there's nothing more going on than the basic physics. Everything at the higher levels is constituted by basic physical entities, and it unfolds in accordance with basic physical laws. So we could say, in a sense, that everything is physical. There's nothing more to the world than the basic physical entities and operating in accordance with basic physical laws. Everything else is a consequence of those, if you like. Everything is constituted by those. As Saul Kripke, to borrow an image from Saul Kripke, once God had fixed the basic physical facts, he'd fixed all the facts on this view. So if God were to create a duplicate world to this one and were simply to reproduce all the basic physical...
Everything is physical. No. Physics is a description of your experience, right? It's a clarified, simplified, objectified presentation of your experience in order for you to predict what is going to happen, right? What happens might be on the broadest scales of what you get. So light could change, for instance, right? If you turn the heat up, the light of this object is going to change, whatever, right? Something like that. But those are based on experiences of prior experience that then when this happens, and I'm explaining it using my, extending my previous formula for whatever, right? So it's like the mind is geared towards presenting physics. You already have physics. It has just not been completely described using, let's say, mathematical systems like he's doing here, right? And that's just because that's a process, ongoing process, you could say, right? But since all of this is an abstraction from the qualia, you cannot use those abstractions to go back to qualia and explain those. And what you do then is to say, well, then qualia doesn't matter. No, that's the origin of all the abstractions. It's the most important thing you have. And you're going to tell me I shouldn't take it seriously, right? So you have abstract. And by the way, if these qualia are illusions, how did you get to all this social, psychological, neural, cellular? How did you get to that consensus idea? Didn't you learn about it? Weren't you taught this, right? How did you get that? Using your qualia, right? You were listening to some professor or whatever, right? Telling you this is how it is. So it's like, no, it doesn't work, because you can't say that you're using an illusion to get to an understanding that proves that how you got to that understanding is an illusion. It's a circular argument. It doesn't work, right? It doesn't work. You have to distinguish between abstractions and the pure experience of qualia, right? And just because the qualia's barebone qualia doesn't give you anything, basically, right? The color of the tiger is not important. It's that it's tiger that is important, right? The same color could be somewhere else where it's less important, right? It could be a part of a rock that has the same color as tiger. Who gives a crap, right? But and you know, who gives a crap about particular the color of the tiger? Because tiger is the abstraction, is the cognition that is important to me. But that doesn't mean I could get to the tiger without those qualia, right? Those qualia are responsible for me to be able to cognize tiger. Okay, I think I've beaten this horse to death now.
Facts of this world, but arrange for all the basic physical entities to be in exactly the same position and set up all the same basic physical laws. If you duplicated that, all the basic physical facts, then you would have duplicated everything. All the rest, all the higher levels of chemical, cellular, neural, social, psychological, social, and so on, would all come along for free, as it were, because ultimately it's nothing more than those things operating in accordance with the basic physical laws. Okay, so that's, again, I want to stress that that's a very simplified picture, but
you might point out, or I might point out, that the picture of that psychological guy there, right, with these weird cogwheels inside, there's no eyes, there's no mouth, There's no ears, right? He doesn't need those. He don't need coelia. He just needs his inner system in order to understand social and neural and cellular and so on, right? But how does he arrive at that social and neural and those higher levels and lower levels if all he has are those cogwheels inside? How does he get to it, right? He's locked within that skull with those cogwheels. So is the rest just pure guesswork or what? How do you get to it, right? You can't just say this is how it is without arguing. It's so stupidly bad philosophy, right? You can't just hand out stuff as if it's given to you. That's not how you do good philosophy, in particular metaphysics, right? You find a reduction base, a starting point, and say, I'm starting with this because so and so, right? And then you work from there and establish the rest. You can't just talk about social, psychological, all these terms you're throwing around. You're not proving anything. You're basically just showing how ignorant you are of good philosophy, in my opinion.
It's sufficiently accurate to get us to understand the problem of fitting phenomenality into this picture. The problem, of course, is that phenomenality doesn't seem to be reductively explicable in these ways. It seems that phenomenal properties can't be characterized in functional terms in terms of what they do. They're just pure feel. And we can't capture them, capture their nature in terms of certain tasks that they perform, certain operations that are being performed, which we could then explain by identifying the mechanisms that perform them. They're just a pure feel. So how do we explain those? How do we fit those into this picture, where everything can be reductively explained? So here's one way of trying to do that. We could think of them as, if you like, external to the picture, external add-ons to the picture. So the idea is that phenomenal features are extra features of the world in addition to those that are mapped in this picture of the physical world, but they are correlated with features of the physical world, so with features features of the brain, in a lawful way.
Are these texts, are they referring to the drawing on the left? Or is the drawing thus staying there because he needs a drawing? And then these are disconnected statements. It's confusing, right? You're keeping the picture from the last slide, and now you're adding some new statements, apparently. And actually, I feel a bit lost now because I simply can't. These abstractions that I constantly need a definition of in order to understand them in connection with the rest of the picture he's trying to paint is so multi-dimensional now that I can't keep track of it, right? I have to just say, no, now I'm going to sort of listen and see if they can find something that makes a kind of sense while he's just the tsunami of words, right? Phenomenal features are external add-ons to the physical world. What's external to the physical world? What is that? What is outside the physical world? And where is the physical world? How did you get to that, right? It's so huge and unexplained in this way he does it that it's impossible to handle, right? You're taking so much for granted also that needs an explanation or definitions or something like that, or maybe some axioms you state that I'm working from this axiom done, right? They correlate with physical features in a lawful way. Lawful way? Is that when it's a rock, it looks like this, or it has this add-on, or what? I'm dumbfounded at this point, right?
So the idea is this: that let's say we assume that phenomenal properties correlate with certain brain states. When you're in a certain brain state, the state that's occurs when you see something blue, then you have a blue quality. You're acquainted with phenomenal blueness.
Oh, hang on. I need to hear that again.
Blue, then
Let's have it
the
again.
idea is this, that let's say we assume that phenomenal properties correlate with certain brain states. When you're in a certain brain state, the state that's occurs when you see some.
What is a brain state? I don't understand what a brain state is. I'm not experiencing brain states, right? If you're referring to some kind of neuroscience that shows up on a computer screen, when people are looking at bananas, this area of the brain gets red or something. Is that a brain state we're referring to? Who cares, right? You will always be able to make some kind of qualitative representation of this thing. It doesn't correlate, right? That's what the heart problem points out. There is no connection between the color, the qualia, and this you call a brain state, right? There's nothing that says that because there's a blob on my screen here, that proves that it has to be yellow, for instance, right? It doesn't work. It doesn't work this way. And it's not because you need to explain it or there's something missing in an explanation. It's because of bad metaphysics, man, right? You can't get to the answer of this question. You can't get to an answer to the heart problem because you don't have access to it. That's why it's impossible. So you have the horse before the cart, or the cart before the horse here, right? And that's why you run into the heart problem. And now you're trying to solve it by saying the qualia doesn't matter. Oh, man. Okay, let's have it.
Thing. Blue, then you have a blue quality. You're acquainted with.
So what he's saying, listen very carefully. You are experiencing blue, therefore you have blue qualia. Now that's a circular argument, right? He is saying the apple is red, therefore it's red, right? That doesn't work. No, you have an experience. You don't know why you have a blue experience, right? There's nothing to explain the blueness. That's the point that you are trying to use to refute it. And I'm trying to point out that's all you have, man, right? And what follows from it, of course, right? Like the cognitions and so on. The blue is so important for you to get around, man, right? And all the other qualia types, various types of qualia, right? But listen, Kev, this points out that he thinks that he knows there's blue, therefore he is experiencing blue. So he already knew there's a blue, so he didn't need the qualia blue, the how it is likeness, right? No, he only knows about blue in the case that he experiencing blue, right? And he has no idea, nobody, in my opinion, I can talk for myself, of course. But axiomatically, I'm saying, okay, everybody is working this way. That's my approach, right? I only have access to blue in the case I am experiencing blue, right? I don't know if there should be blue, right? That I can have some conscious thought about things being blue is not the same as saying I have a qualia or its likeness to have blue. So I'm sort of having, oh, there's blue there and there's blue in here. No, that out there I don't have access to, right? And that's what this point he hasn't identified this built-in problem, this built-in. I need to plug in some juice on my laptop here. I see I'm going chunky. What's it called? Yeah, chunky. I need to lose some pounds. Getting what's it called? Jittery. When it gets below 5%, my AirBook here, my MacBook Air, right? So I see it instantly when it reaches 5%. It sort of starts to get slow, right? So this is a good pointer for me. Actually, I like it does that. Maybe one could say that, just as an off remark here, right? That it should go perfectly until it sort of closes off. But it's actually nice to have this kind of reminder. Oh, put in your, your power supply before it goes completely cold, right? Okay. He says millions of fundamental laws linking specific complex brain states with specific simple phenomenal states. I don't. These claims are simply. It has nothing to do in metaphysics, in my opinion, and it's simply too big, right? You can't first talk about little women with boxes, right? And then throw me a line like millions of fundamental laws linking specific complex brain states with specific simple phenomenal states. Done, right? You can't argue this way, man, right? It's dysfunctional, right? You have no psychological ability to understand how a layperson, I guess professional philosophers like yourself, wouldn't be interested in this unless they have sort of a quirk with metaphysics, right? So laypersons on the YouTubes, you need to take it step by step, right? And yes, you need to have an overview, but you can't start off by saying there are millions of fundamental laws linking whatever, right? And use that as an argument for why it doesn't work, man, right? It's like I have tried to express it, but I'm trying to come up with a good analogy. I can't come up with a good analogy. It's just it's the scope of things that when you start out in a presentation of something, it should give the reader or the listener a feeling of safety in the argument, right? Where they're not feeling that they are being dragged around a bit and overloaded or being confused by the amount of data or text or presentation stuff, right? And losing track of definition and understandings of all sorts of terms being used and so on, right? This is just overloaded with all that. Losing the core argument somewhere in there. And I'm saying that's the whole purpose of this huge presentation. It is to get you so confused that you potentially just accept it, okay, I guess it's right? Because anybody in the right mind if you were sort of trying to present a business deal here, right? You wanted to ask some venture capitalist, would you like to, finance this idea I have and starting a company producing this product, whatever. You wouldn't make a 6-hour presentation series, right? Where you drown the core idea within the lecture 3, sort of 2 hours into lecture 3 or something, right? You wouldn't. They would say, "Fuck off, you man!" Right? What are you trying to do? Confuse us or what? No, it's only in academia stupid shit like this can occur, right? If he should, I should maybe look up that idea. It's the 10, 20, 30 rule. I'm doing this guy Kawasaki. I actually like that idea. Let's see. Guy Kawasaki's 10, 20, 30 rule of PowerPoint, right? Let's have it. And there's a good amount of stuff about Guy Kawasaki I don't like. He's very into social justice and he's sort of stupidly political in stuff that he clearly has no... It's like some of these people who become, famous people, all of a sudden they think they have answers for everything, right? and that people are longing to hear their political stuff and so on. Fuck off, right? Okay. Kawasaki advocated the 10-20-30 rule of PowerPoint, which banks on the idea that a presentation should have 10 slides, last no more than 20 minutes, and contain no font smaller than 30 points. Okay, so I switched around. I said no more than 30 minutes and 20. No, it's actually 20 minutes and font size 30, right? 10 slides. If you can't present your shit in 10 slides, right? I think I use 5 or 6 slides in my presentation of my metaphysics, right? Where I also point out the consequences for that in epistemology and ethics, right? In 5 or 6 slides. And I try to use big font, right? So I'm close to this sort of ideal. It's just a rule of thumb, right? It's not, you don't have to be 10, it could be 9 slides, 8 slides, maybe 11 slides, depending on the topic, right? But it's not 275 slides and 6 hours, right? And font size 9, right? It's, this is just to get you to the point, get you to the fucking core of this problem. So if you can't do this, if you can't explain it simply, it's an indicator that you don't know what the hell you're talking about, right? Let's see, can I get it in the picture here? Yeah. Sorry if you didn't, sorry. It's, the browser window is not the same size as, okay. So there you have it, right? Avoid basic design mistakes that ultimately stand out for the vast sea of lackluster presentations. Well, yeah, this is a sign of the lackluster presentation, right? The Keith Frankish here, right? And a lot of other presentations I've seen. That nobody seems to understand that the presentation is not the whole thing. The presentation is a support mechanism, a graphical support for what you're trying to say, right? When you're referring to an experience of some kind, you have a representation of that experience as close to the thing itself as you can get, right? Or otherwise you explain it in terms that illuminates what you mean, right? And if you can't, if the idea is so complex that you need 6 hours and 275 slides or whatever, there's just something that doesn't work here, right? Nothing is that complicated, right? Nothing is that complicated. It's because you haven't thought all ends of this. And all these loose ends that you think you need to tie together to get to this point are just pointers that you haven't dealt with it sufficiently, right? Now, I would rather have something that is simple, but maybe lacking a few details here and there, but where I get the core idea very clearly, than a very precisely described idea covered up in 275 slides during 6 hours, right? I would rather have a minimalistic 75% than 100% covered in billions of minutiae that is not important for me to understand the core argument, right? And that's why I'm saying these people seem to be trained to cover up the core ideas in a lot of bullshit in order to sound like they are very smart academics, right? I mean, that's how else would you do it? Because nobody in the right mind would use a presentation like this, right? You wouldn't want to do that. And know that the structure of the presentation, starting out by giving you ideas of little women with boxes, right? And then saying there are all these arguments against indirect, and then sort of grooming you into the argument and sort of trying to point that these are bad arguments, therefore my argument must be good, right? Sort of an indirect approach to justifying your argument before you have even presented the core argument, right? Can you tell me whether he has presented his core argument yet? I can't, because I'm confused, right? Now I know I'm in a deconstruction mode here, so I'm also concerned about various details whenever I see something that sort of rubs me the wrong way, and then I might be not fully focused on trying to get to the bigger picture. But it shouldn't be impossible, right? I'm still confused where is he just repeating himself now? Has he already made the statement? And he's just repeating himself for the next 2 hours now? Or what is it coming in the last 2 minutes or the last 10 minutes? And the first 2 hours and 10 minutes are just sort of grooming experience in order to prepare you for the final argument and at the end of this 2 hour and 20 minute lecture. It's like, oh man, get to the fucking point, man. Right? Get to the point. Okay, we will finish this slide and hopefully we will get to the next slide before we reach the 1 hour mark for me.
Phenomenal blueness. And that's not reductively explicable. Everything about your brain, the fact that the complex state that your brain is in at that moment, the state of perceiving something blue in the world, that all...
Perceiving something blue in the world. Now he says there's blue in the world? So blue is outside his experience. Is that the case? Is that what you're saying? That sounded very much like it to me, right? So blue is out there and then transmitting itself to blueness inside you, or what? Right? This is very, very bad metaphysics, right? You have no idea how stupid it is. It's unbelievable, man, right? And he is educated in philosophy and has apparently been doing it for decades. It's unbelievable how ignorant he is.
All that can be reductively explained in terms of cellular processes and chemical processes and so on. But having this experience of phenomenal blueness, that can't. It's just a brute fact that...
What's the difference between blueness and phenomenal blueness? Is this there must be blue out there and then you have a phenomenon of blue inside you? Well, if you need an experience of whatever is out there in order to understand what is out there, you can't know what is out there before you have an experience of it, right? And if all you have are experiences, how the hell do you know about that out there? How do you get to that if it's not based on these abstractions? And then you're taking these abstractions and just placing them outside and say they're out there. Also the blueness, apparently, right? Oh, man.
When your brain is in that highly complex physical state, all of which can be reductively explained, you have this particular quality, this particular phenomenal property, phenomenal blueness. And that's just a fundamental law of nature. It can't be further explained. It just happens that way. And then, again, of course,
does the blueness pop out of the neural? How does it know that it's a neural? Why is it in that state there's blueness? I don't understand why it's not in the cellular or the chemical or the basic or physical. Why? So is it just emerging from the neural level? There's no blueness here. And then when there's enough of those cellulars together, apparently blueness pops out or something. And also this kind of, I'm not particularly fond of these kinds of reductions here, right? It's like, okay, yeah, there's a basic physical. If you have one atom, you don't have chemical. But if you have several atoms, there might be chemical. Okay, so when you have enough atoms, there's chemical. Okay, so if you have enough chemical, you can talk about cellular. But what does that entail, right? So if you have enough, a degree of number or quantity of cellular, you have apparently neural. But there's no delineations. It's sort of fluffy, what we are talking about. And then he just places blueness somewhere in there, in this soup of reduction, which is sort of based on abstractions, right? It's it's nice to have a PowerPoint slide where you can just place stuff without being very clear about how that actually works in your experience, right? It's not the neural that creates the experience. It's the experience that creates the neural, right? It's because you have experiences like blueness and so on that you can talk about neural and psychological and social and cellular and so on, right? You wouldn't, nobody would have these. It's like the first living organism arrived with an idea of social, psychological, neural, and so on, and then they added the colors to it. No, it's the other way around. It's the colors from which you have made abstractions, and that you are sitting in your ivory tower and juggling around and saying, okay, there's a structure here, right? But without all the colors and all the qualia, there wouldn't be any of this on the left side. So the cart is before the horse, right?
It's a similar fundamental law when you're in the state that when your brain is in the state of perceiving something yellow, then you're acquainted with phenomenal yellowness, and when it's in the state of perceiving something red, you're in the state of perceiving something. When your brain's in the state of
you are perceiving something red. No. Now he's saying that redness arrives through your senses. No, it doesn't, right? And even materialists like him should understand that these are so-called photons, if you're talking about colors, that travel through your eyes and are transduced into electricity or something like that. It's not redness, right? That's the whole problem. Don't you understand the heart problem, man, right? Photons, why should they become red? What is redness, right? That's the heart problem. There's no redness out there, right? Even materialists would say that, I think, right? So you don't even understand what the hell, David Chalmers is talking about or what? It's bad, this.
Perceiving something red, you have an experience of phenomenal redness and so on. Phenomenal green, purple.
Yeah. Let's get on with it.
And all these laws. Similarly for other sense modalities, for
what is this? So
auditory system is
so
in a
all of a
state,
sudden
then
green becomes sound or what? Get the
you have a certain
out of here, man, right?
auditory phenomenal experience, and again, it's just a fundamental law that this phenomenal.
Yeah, there's just this weird Cartesian theater of sounds, and don't take it seriously. No, we have our reduction here from social to basic physiology, and social means communism, right? Actually, social means communism, okay? So he's a communist, obviously, right? All these colors and sounds don't matter. It's just a funny show, right? Okay, I think this is simply. Oh my God, man! He's too much. I think we'll stop here, and I'll try to catch up where we got here, because we are reaching the 1 hour limit for my part in the series here, right? So, I mean, what do you think of this? Does this help you understand the metaphysics he's talking about? Other than he's completely crazy, right? He has no sensibilities toward deeper aspects of this. In fact, he's sort of a pretense of a scientist trying to sound philosophical, right? Thinking that by having some scientific abstractions, he can tell you about your experiences, right? And experiences that he himself have extracted the things he's talking about are extracted from those experiences that he's trying to refute. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's what word would you use, right? It's awful. And it's so overly complicated, right? As I pointed out, you don't need to do all this shit, right? And he's also talking about things that you might sort of say these are details that you don't need to go into in order to explain that this is something basic that people should already understand, right? Okay. Share, like, and subscribe. Give me a comment and join the Discord, link below, hopefully. And otherwise, see you in the next one.